Welcome back to East Texas. Now joined at the desk with court reporter, I guess is what we'll call you today.
Yes.
This is Avery Niles. Avery, you were in trial all day here in Smith County in the case of Daniel Nyabuto. Can you refresh us just a little bit on what he's charged with and what led us up to this
Yes,
day?
so he is charged with intoxicated manslaughter from an incident that took place in 2022, July 29th, if I'm correct. Basically, he hit a deputy that was pulled over on the side of the road. He allegedly hit them, which is Nyabuto. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at this point. This is day 4 of the trial here, and so they left off on Friday talking a little bit about with the, I guess, the deputy that actually did the sobriety test of Nyabuto.
And this is something that they've been talking about pretty much every day of trial.
Correct.
Whether this test is admissible, whether the deputy that took it was messing with evidence, that sort of thing. Why are we still talking
Correct.
about this?
Yeah, and they left off on this on Friday, but picked right back up on it. And like you said, they're just kind of bouncing around at different points, saying, this part that he might have not done correctly, or this part, or this, I guess, just to try to prove what they're ultimately going to say, that this, all of this, or what he's saying is, ineffective, or, to void it altogether. So, yeah, that's what really happened. There was a lot of bouncing around today, so it's kind of, hard to follow all of it. They would go from body cam footage of inside of the ER room and talking a little bit about how they showed that body cam footage, and the deputy was there signing before the nurse who actually took the blood itself. That's the nurse is supposed to sign it, and then he does, which that was not the order that things went,
So
and
the nurse signed it and then he signed it?
no, he signed it, and then the nurse signed it, which is supposed to be the opposite way around. It's supposed to be the nurse, and then he signed it. And so, yeah, that took place. And it's just all of these different things that I guess what they're trying to do is prove that, all of these little things.
Improper chain of evidence.
Yes, goes all together in one thing. So yeah, that was one of the things that they really talked about today was, that signing. Why did that happen? Why did you do that before the nurse signed? He said, well, we were just trying to get things done, and they were taking the blood. That's why I signed it. Everything that is there is still truthful in what I'm saying, and it's all on the body cam footage. You can see I even, accidentally wrote in the wrong spot, and he says, oh, I accidentally did, wrote in this line instead of this line, and I admitted it. It's just to get things moved along. And then another thing that they were talking about was the blood, which is something that was talked about on Friday. The blood, they say, the box that they use, the first one was not working. So he gave a second one. Yeah. So they gave a second one, which he was then questioned, did you give a second one from a different bag or the same bag that the first one came from? And he said, no, it was, from the same bag. And why did you do that? He said, that's what I had on me, basically. That's what I, gave to them. And just talking through all of the blood sample stuff, and then we kind of go back to the scene itself. They, like I said, they hopped around, so it's kind of hard to follow. But the first one was the body cam footage of them doing the actual sobriety test and talking a little bit about that. Basically, their argument was that there was a lot of lights that were going on, on the scene, because there was multitude of different agencies and different groups. There was fire trucks, all kinds of stuff, and they all had their emergency lights on. And talking about, what they say, the state says, the test, when it is completed, I guess the Department of Public Safety, there needs to not really be that many lights, because it can cause issues with, the person seeing, or might get dizzy and stuff like that. And especially it's strobe.
Led to his
his sobriety, his sobriety test, and like how they were completed, and what the results ultimately showed, during that time. So yeah, there's just a lot going on. Basically, they showed the body cam footage to show, there was lights flashing and everything. Why didn't you tell them to turn it off? He's like, there were so many people there, I can't.
deputy who was lost his life.
Correct.
quite a big response, especially when
Yeah,
their own brothers.
you know, and he was saying, like, I couldn't go to each person and tell them to turn off the lights before, you know, the people that were directly around it in front and back of where that test took place, he asked to turn them off, but then he was questioned, you know, why didn't you go to the next person and tell them, because those lights were still shining, which, you know, that's just how it is when you're being questioned like this. And so he said, you know, I couldn't find them. I had to conduct this test. We have to kind of move things along, get people, you know, at least them out of the roadway and kind of moved and everything like that. And so we just went on with doing the test. So yeah, that was called into question whether or not that was, you know, valid or not, and if that, you know, should be
the decision making of that deputy. Now,
correct.
We were talking to JD, who was covering the case last
Yes.
week, and he was talking a lot about the demeanor of Nyabuto in court. He said that he had so many family members there that were all there to support him. Is that still holding up today?
Yeah, he did. He had, I'm guessing, probably the same group of people come in, and you can definitely, you know, see that they're there in support of him, you know, and his demeanor, he's just very, he's not really showing a lot of emotion right now, but I feel like he's just kind of just listening to all of the evidence and just really kind of like paying attention to it. I don't think that's, you know, necessarily a bad thing that he's not showing emotion or anything like that,
And
but
I mean, the number one thing you have, a lawyer will tell you during any type of trial where there's a jury is you don't show happiness, you don't show sadness, nothing, because that can influence the jury and all sorts of things. Now, do you see anyone from Deputy Bustos' family in the courtroom? Looks very
I haven't really been able to tell, you know, and I know, correct. Yeah, they're not wearing name tags or have, you know, any sort of indication of who they are. I mean, I would assume that there probably is some. I will say, though, there is a lot of, like, different law enforcement people that aren't necessarily testifying yet or that don't have to be in there, you know, or held back because they're going to testify later, coming in and out at all times, you know, and they're all there, and I feel like that's his family as well. So yeah, you can see that, you know, there's lots of people that come in and out all throughout the day, whether it's, you know, other defense attorneys that I've just seen like throughout the court system at, you know, in Smith County that aren't actually trying this case, but, you know, in between their breaks of when they're, you know, doing different things, going in and out, and when they have time they come in, you know, and then, like I said, the law enforcement aspect of this, and Nyabuto's families you know, as well. So another thing that was really interesting and we kind of covered tonight at 6, like I said, there's so much going on.
It's just one thing after
one of the big things that I think that took place today was talking about the consent of the blood from Nyabuto to the deputy himself. Basically, the deputy says he went back and forth several times whether or not he was consenting on giving the blood, and, you know, then asking questions like, okay, well, if I don't consent to the blood, like, what happens, you know? And he then explained to him, well, I would get an affidavit, you know, or warrant signed by a judge. We would take you to the hospital because you have to get checked out anyways if you're in a wreck and in our watch, and then they would perform that blood test. And, you know, you could see in the body cam footage that he then said, well, no, I don't want to do it. And then he then goes back and kind of reverses and it's like, okay, well, when do you want me to do it? Do you want me to do it now? And he has to explain, you know, no, we have to wait till we get to the hospital. So the question is whether he consented or not, and if that warrant was then necessary because he consented. So the defense was saying, you know, he was going back and forth 2 or 3, 4 times saying whether or not he wanted it. And, you know, he was defending his actions, saying, you know, after a certain point, he can't go back and forth. And, you know, I made the decision that he didn't seem like he was confident in what he wanted to do. So I marked it as a refusal, as I'm supposed to do. And that's how it went. Then we, you know, had the warrant signed and everything, and, you know, it was done. So then the state came up and asked the question, you know, like, what is your training supposed to do? If they're going back and forth, if they're not sure what they want to do, what are you supposed to then do? He's like, well, I have to mark it as a refusal. Like, that's just what we're told to do. So, yeah, that was a big part of this as well today. And I found that really interesting, the back and forth of it all. And, you know, whether or not it was something that was consented to or not, because technically he did both. He consented and then he took away his consent. Yeah. And then did it again. So, yeah. lots happening in this case. Lots. So Gayle was on the stand the entire day, mostly taken over by the defense, asking these questions, going forth between different instances of that night and questioning why he did this or why he did that, and if it, why he didn't do this instead of that, that kind of thing. Then they rested and then gave it over to the state. They asked a few questions just to clarify what they were kind of saying, and then went back to the defense, and it just went back and forth and back and forth until the final. They're like, okay, we've rested, and at that time it was 5 o'clock, so they're like, okay, perfect, we're gonna wrap up, and tomorrow we'll start with a new witness on the stand at 9 a.m. So
Alrighty, well, thank you so much for
of course, yeah,
track of all of that.
it's a lot, but that's what these cases take.
These cases take a hot second.
Yeah.
All right, once again, Mrs. Avery Niles joining us at the desk. Let's go ahead and let me get this camera shot fixed really quick, and we'll go and talk about some of our